Hello, everyone, and a very warm welcome to today's webinar on the MSCA Postdoctoral Fellowships 2026 call. It's really wonderful to see such strong interest and to know that we have participants joining us from across Ireland and indeed around the world. So wherever you're tuning in from, you're very welcome today. Just before we begin our webinar, I just want to go through a few brief housekeeping points. Closed captioning is available. You can enable it yourself by clicking on the dots on the bottom of your screen and then clicking on the CC button. Today's session is being recorded and the recording will be shared through our channels in the coming days, and then we'll send a link to that recording to everyone who has registered for the webinar today. So my name is Yvonne Halpin. I'm the national delegate and one of two national contact points for the Marie Skłodowska-Curie Actions in Ireland. And I'm joined by my colleague and also MSCA national contact point, Colm O'Hare. So the MSCA National Support Service is based within Research Ireland, Ireland's new research and innovation agency. And Research Ireland brings together funding and support across the research and innovation landscape with a mandate to strengthen excellence in research, impact and career development across all disciplines. And our role within Research Ireland is to support the research community in Ireland and indeed those wishing to come to Ireland in applying for MSCA funding and in successfully implementing MSCA projects. And we do this through information sessions, workshops, webinars, individual query support, and others. If any questions arise for you in the days or months ahead as you prepare your applications, please don't hesitate to get in touch. And you can contact us at mariecurie@researchireland.ie. We're always happy to help there. So I'd also like to briefly mention Your Access Ireland. So this is a service hosted by the Irish Universities Association, and Your Access Ireland provides free, tailored advice to researchers and their families who are coming to Ireland to work or study. And it also hosts a platform for posting expressions of interest for MSCA fellowships. So you can find more information on Your Access Ireland at www.iua.ie. So today's webinar then focuses on the European Union's Marie Skłodowska-Curie Actions Postdoctoral Fellowships. And this is a flagship programme supporting researchers' careers through excellent research, international mobility, training, skills development, and long-term career progression. So this is a session for potential applicant researchers, supervisors, and host organisations based in Ireland from across all disciplines and sectors, including, but not limited to, higher education institutions, research organisations, industry, civil society organisations, and beyond. We will have a Q&A session after the presentation, so I invite you to please post your questions into the Q&A function, and we will address as many of those as we can. So that brings us to our guest speakers for today. And we are delighted to be joined by Ilse de Walle from the European Research Executive Agency, who will present an overview of the Postdoctoral Fellowships call. And then following Ilse's presentation, we will hear from Dr. Laura Francis, our MSCA Fellow and our case study from Maynooth University here in Ireland. So Colm and Laura, you can turn off your cameras, and Ilse, I'll invite you to please go ahead and start sharing your screen while I introduce you. So Ilse is a project advisor at the European Research Executive Agency, which is also known as REA in short. And Ilse has over 15 years experience in EU research funding and the MSCA, and particularly in the postdoctoral fellowships. Ilse has worked as both a project manager and call coordinator with a strong focus on managing scientific evaluation processes. Ilse's academic background is in archaeology, specialising in the ancient Near East and the prehistory of the Balkans, and she has also co-authored publications in the field of research ethics and artificial intelligence. So Ilse, thank you for joining us today, and I will hand over to you.
Many thanks, Yvonne, for the introduction, and also from my side, a big welcome to all of you. In today's session on the postdoctoral fellowships, I will be covering the setup and objectives of the scheme. I'll give you some information on how to submit a proposal and our evaluation process behind it, and give you some statistics on Ireland in the MSCA PF. And as Yvonne kindly mentioned, there will be time for a Q&A at the end of the webinar. So first things first, where do we place the MSCA in Horizon Europe? Horizon Europe being our framework program from 2021 to 2027. And as you can see here, it contains three pillars: excellent science, global challenges, and innovative Europe. The Marie Curie Actions, Marie Skłodowska-Curie Actions, are a firm part of Pillar 1, excellent science. When we zoom in on that, we see there are 5 distinct actions: the doctoral network, staff exchanges, co-fund, and MSc and citizens. Some of you might remember that as a researcher's night. And of course, why you are here today, the postdoctoral fellowships to offer support to excellent postdoctoral researchers. The budget for this year is, of course, indicative, can be increased, is about 400 million euros. Majority of that is set aside for the European fellowships and about 60 million for global fellowships. I'll come back on that distinction in the next slide, as it is very important to choose early on which implementation mode you will be choosing. Call has opened on April 9th and will close on September 9th. Now, the call deadline, if you consider applying for our call, is very strict. It's September 9th, 5 p.m. Brussels time, and it is not flexible. Then I will read for you a very complex sounding sentence from our work program. So saying the MSCA Postdoctoral Fellowships aim to enhance the creative and innovative potential of researchers with a PhD who wish to acquire new skills through advanced training and international, interdisciplinary, and intersectoral mobility. It's quite a mouthful, and I hope that by the end of my presentation, you'll have a better idea of what this means. But first of all, I'll explain you the distinction between European and global fellowships. Keep in mind, you can apply only for one during one call year. European fellowships are the large majority of our actions. What does it mean? It means that a researcher will come from any member state, associated country, or third country to do a period of research in Europe. Very straightforward. Global fellowships, on the other hand, are a bit more complex in their setup. They involve a researcher leaving for a third country for what we call an outgoing phase, and then at the end come back for a mandatory return phase back to Europe. Has 2 phases, a bit more complicated, and is also less common, I would say. Both of these can have a non-academic placement at the end to extend the fellowship with another 6 months, specifically in the non-academic sector. I'll come back to that later as well. First, though, the objectives, the official objectives of our call, split into 2 groups: for researchers and for organizations. For researchers, we aim first and foremost to increase their research and transferable skills, which hopefully leads to an improved employability and career prospects, not just in the academic world, but also outside the academic world in the private sector, for instance. We also aim to forge new mindsets and approaches to R&I work through this international, intersectoral, and interdisciplinary experience. And of course, enhance networking and communication capacities, not just in the scientific community, but also with the general public, who after all have to support the research that is being done. When we look at the objectives for host organizations, we hope to see an increased alignment of working conditions, an increased global attractiveness, visibility, and reputation of the organizations that participate, and linked to that, a stronger R&I capacity. And new also is that we love to see a more regular feedback of research results into teaching and education at these participating organizations in the hopes of prepping the next generation of researchers as well. Now, of course, our scheme comes with a whole set of conditions. First of all, a participating organization. We are mono-beneficiary ground, which means that there is going to be one single independent organization in a member state or associated country that will be in charge of this project. Other partners can be added, but there is one organization that will be our main point of contact. More important, though, for you in attendance here is the conditions for researchers. First of all, we have to have researchers that are in possession of a PhD at the call deadline. or have had a successful viva prior to that date. Linked to this is the limit to up to 8 years of research experience after said PhD. Of course, there can be exceptions applied to that, such as career breaks, parental leave, work outside of research, etc. If you consider applying for a European fellowship, you can be of any nationality, but if you would like to apply for a global fellowship, you have to be a national or long-term resident of a member state or associated country. And another very important rule is underlined here is the mobility rule, which means that you may not have resided or had main activity in the country where you want to go, so here Ireland, for more than 12 months in the last 3 years before call deadline. Why? Because the postdoctoral fellowships are first and foremost a mobility scheme. Duration-wise, for European fellowships, you can choose anything between 12 and 24 months. Majority of our projects, I can say that, are of course for 24 months. Global fellowships, because of their different setup, are also slightly longer. So they have the same outgoing phase duration of 12 to 24 months, but they are always followed by a mandatory 12-month return phase to Europe. Next up, these two things are optional. I have to say that first and foremost is secondments and placements. Secondments are a type of temporary physical mobility to another organization where the researcher will do some very specific tasks or research or even be trained in things that the main host organization does not offer. Now, these secondments can be taken worldwide in any sector, public, private, and can last up to half of the total duration of the project. This is a change compared to the past, where it was 1/3. So we're allowing more time for these secondments to happen. An optional additional placement is kind of a special type of secondments. This has to happen in the non-academic sector and is restricted to Europe or associated countries. It has to be anytime between 1 and 6 months, and it happens at the end of the standard fellowship. This has to be included in your proposal before you submit your proposal and will be evaluated as such. Training activities, I will generally skip. This means just that if you integrate any training activities, they have to include also competences that are common to all fields, as well as foster a culture of open science, for instance. What is more important for you is to know about resubmissions. So we consider a resubmission to be a proposal that has the same recruiting organization and researcher. And if such a proposal was submitted in 2025 but received a score of less than 80%, you cannot unfortunately resubmit it in the 2026 call. Will be made ineligible. You're meant to skip 1 year in that context. This is also a change to last year. We increased our threshold just a little bit. Very important as well, of course, is to know the budget. What do we offer if you're awarded a grant? You will see that there are 2 categories: unit contributions for the host organization, always 1,650 euros a month, and a contribution for the researcher, aka your salary. These are the amounts per person month. So there is a living allowance of 6,350 euros standard. But for Ireland, of course, there is a correction coefficient of 135.8% that applies. So in reality, this brings it more to 8,600 and something euros. Of course, I have to also say, this is a gross amount, so subject to any deductions for social security and national legislation. You will also receive a mobility allowance of 710 euros per month. And for those who qualify, there will be a family allowance of 660 euros a month. Now that I've outlined the very basic principles of our call, I'll spend a few more minutes on how to submit a proposal. Important to know, everything is done electronically through our funding and tenders portal. And when you apply, you will have to fill out Part A, application forms, and provide a technical description of your work, what we call the Part B. Very important when I talk about that is that we have a template, so please use that template, the correct and current proposal template for the call. Why? Because there will be changes year to year, and if you were to use a template from another action or another call year, it might affect the evaluation of your proposal. So always make sure you use the 2026 edition. What do we fill out in the part A, the application forms? Of course, some general information, an acronym, a title, the scientific area which your proposal will fit in, and very importantly, up to 5 MSCA descriptors, as we call them, but basically keywords. These are meant to characterize the content of your research proposal, and you will list them in descending order of relevance. 3 are mandatory, 2 are optional. We do recommend that you put as many as needed, and linked to that, if you feel they didn't quite yet capture your proposal, you also can fill out some free keywords. As in any scientific proposal and text and anything, you will have to provide us with an abstract that details the content of your proposal. And of course, linked to my previous slide, the resubmission information. We also request some basic information about the participants. Of course, we need to know the main beneficiary participant information code. Best thing is to request that to the host organization that you intend to apply with. They have that on record. You also have to provide that information for outgoing host and global fellowships, and if applicable, a non-academic placement host. With regards to your own information as researcher, we need some personal details, your name, your birth date, your very important PhD award date, and in case this is more than 8 years ago, also the extension table. And we also request your countries of residence and activity for the past 5 years, so we can check that mobility rule is complied with. Critically, of course, is the budget table, where you will fill out the duration that you chose for your project, also complete the country in which this will take place, and whether or not you qualify for the family allowance. There is also some other data to complete about the supervisor, publication, gender equality plan, also important ethics and security self-assessment, for which we offer detailed guidance online, and some other very call-specific questions that you would see when you access the application forms. So with that out of the way, let's focus now on the part B, which is the core of your proposal. It consists of 2 documents, part B1 and part B2, and they have to be separate and in the right space. Why? Because the part B, which contains a technical description of the scientific work, has a very strict limit of 10 pages. If there are more pages uploaded, they are just not visible to the evaluators. They will not be taken into account. So keep that strict limit of 10 pages in mind. Linked to that, we also have, of course, a minimum font size, 11 points, to allow our evaluators to easily read your text. Good news is that our Part B template is available on the call page, so you can use that to structure your proposal accordingly. The Part B2 has no formal page limit, so you can put more information there, but we do request that you follow the recommendations of that template. It will contain the CV of the researcher, as detailed as possible, also tables and information on the participating organizations, and in the case of global fellowships, a letter of commitment from that future outgoing host in a third country. The Part B template has all this information and more, including what to put where, so we do recommend that you consult that always from the start. A few words about common errors in proposals. Unfortunately, missing the call deadline, it happens, and it's automatically discarded. The call closes 5 p.m. and that is it. What also happens a lot is that the basic information is not always provided or is provided wrong. Linked to that, also issues with respecting the eligibility requirements, or not providing the right information for the host and the third country host and the current organization. And I put in bold here also the worst issues that you could have is exceeding the page limit and using a smaller than allowed font, because these will directly affect the evaluation that the experts will be making on your proposal. So please avoid those at all costs. Now, as promised, a few words on our evaluation process as well. As you know, we are a bottom-up program. We accept proposals and experts from any and all disciplines. So I've listed them there: chemistry, economic sciences, engineering, environmental sciences, life science, mathematics, physics, and social sciences. To make sure that we do this evaluation properly and offer you a good result, we have a very detailed expert balance as well, not only in those 8 scientific areas, but also in terms of experience, nationality, gender, age, and sector. You might have gathered that this is a very large-scale evaluation. We have lots of proposals coming in, but despite that, we offer a standard peer review exercise. At least 3 experts will see your proposal. This is always happening, 3 to 5. And it's a single stage evaluation, which means that we will evaluate only what you submit and in one go. Now, I'll try to briefly explain what happens after you submit your proposal. So we assign proposals to experts based on your descriptors that you chose in the part A and the keywords and your abstract. So the better you make that, the easier it is for us to find good experts to evaluate. We assign at least 3 experts, sometimes 5 for complex cases, and they will all write their individual evaluation report separately. When that is done, they will meet, bring their individual reports, and discuss every single aspect of the evaluation and write a consensus report. We get that consensus report, including a score. We use that to rank the proposals, and at the end, in February, we can send you your result letter and a decision funding. Now, I've mentioned a few times what the experts are going to be checking, so this is listed here. And this is also replicated in the part B. 3 criteria: excellence, impact, and implementation. Excellence focusing mostly on the project research and innovation objectives, the methodology, but also on the supervision, the training, the transfer of knowledge, and your professional experience as a researcher. And as you can see, this accounts for 50% of your total score, meaning a proposal will stand or fall with excellence. But nevertheless, impact is also important at 30%, which will look at career perspectives, quality of dissemination and exploitation activities, and expected scientific, societal, and economic impacts where applicable. Not every project has those, of course. And the third category is the implementation, which looks at the practical matters such as the work plan, risk assessment, and quality and capacity of the host organizations. Accounts for 20% of the score. Once more, the call planning, with the call deadline put in very obvious 9th of September 2026. You see that it does take us a bit of time to evaluate all these proposals. There are quite a lot of them, and we aim to make the outcome available in February 2027. Projects can then start up to September 2028. We are very generous with our moment to start. We know that how research careers work. This is all a lot to take in, of course, so I've also made a slide with resources and guidance, and I recommend that you always start at the Funding and Tenders portal or call page. It has everything you need in one place: the information, application forms, deadlines, guidance material, FAQs, and of course our guide for applicants, which is your starting point. I've also put some additional information if you want to get more background and relevant information: the work program, the MSCA website, the postdoctoral fellowships specifically, and the application and evaluation forms. And at the bottom, you also see who to contact in case of doubts. Now, as promised, also a few statistics on Ireland. You see that Ireland has a very steady presence throughout the years in the postdoctoral fellowships. But what is more important in this slide is that you see very much the main implementation mode is the European fellowships. You remember that I said that global fellowships have a bit more complex setup, and therefore they are comparatively fewer in number. This slide here shows you some information on collaborations and configurations. You can see from the map of the world that despite the organization, the host organization being Irish, that does not limit you to being in Ireland. Collaborations happen truly all across the globe. I've shown here global fellowships mixed with secondments and NAPs all together. You see it's quite interesting map. But on these NUPs and secondments, they can clearly be used to enrich your proposal if they're well justified for the content of your work. But from the left graph, you can see that there is not a single preferred or correct setup. We fund European and global fellowships equally, almost with and without NUPs and secondments. So don't feel any obligation to put them in. You have just as much chance to get funded with or without. The context and the making sense matters more. On this slide, you can see where people are coming from when they take up a grant in Ireland. So also here you can see that we have a global representation from member states, associated countries, and third countries. And that shows that Ireland is actually very well embedded in the international research world. And the last slide I want to show you is about the distribution of the scientific area. So on the right, you see the overall picture for postdoctoral fellowships, and on the left, you see what's happening in Ireland. So when we look at, for instance, social sciences, humanities, and life sciences, they are among the largest areas, but chemistry, for instance, is a bit more popular in Ireland than overall. You will also see that mathematics and economic sciences are not represented yet. Doesn't mean they don't exist in Ireland. It just means that it's the perfect opportunity to expand in that area and to bring that particular expertise to Ireland, preferably in the form of a postdoctoral fellowship. And I think, yes, that brings me to the end of my presentation. The Q&A, as indicated, will happen at the end of the webinar. And with that, I think I can hand over back to Yvonne.
Thank you, Ilse. That was super. Thank you for the comprehensive overview of the call. And thank you to our attendees for the questions so far. We're trying to answer some of them by typing them so that all attendees can see, and we will of course hold some of them for the live Q&A in a few moments. So just to note as well, to get the maximum benefit from the Q&A for all our attendees, we won't be able to answer specific eligibility questions, but you can come to us separately after the webinar if you have a kind of eligibility query which is specific to your own individual case. So that brings us to our case study. So Laura, I will invite you to turn on your camera if you haven't done so, and you can go ahead and start sharing your screen. So I have the pleasure of introducing you to Dr. Laura Francis from Maynooth University. And Laura is an MSCA Fellow, researcher and translator in the School of Modern Languages, Literatures and Cultures in Maynooth University. Across all her work, she studies the impact of multilingualism on community formation at the foundations of the modern nation state. And in her current MSCA project, she is not only bringing this lens to her research on Irish exiles, who fled the English plantation system for safer shores across the Spanish Empire, but also rendering their alternative hopes for Ireland visible for modern readers through her own public-facing translations and exhibits of rarely seen archival materials. So Laura, delighted you can join us today, and I will hand over to you.
Okay, thank you. You can see the slides okay? Hopefully everything's good.
And we're just waiting for it to go in. That's it. Perfect. In presentation mode. Super.
Okay, great. All right. Thank you so much for the introduction, Yvonne, and also to Yvonne and Colin for organizing the webinar. I'm really excited to talk to you all today about my own journey through the application process from kind of the other side of things from what Ilse mentioned, because I remember very, very clearly being on the applicant side of this process and even actually attending kind of the equivalent of this webinar a few years ago and being very nervous about the call and putting all the materials together. And the MSCA fellow at the time who was giving the case study gave some very sage advice and good guidance. I'm really hoping to be able to give some good tips for you as well. So I'll start with a little bit about myself and my project, because I think coming from another country and from the US and also from an arts, humanities, and social sciences background, it can be a little bit difficult to kind of even conceive like what would an MSCA project actually look like. This was a very different application process from anything that I had applied to in the States, for instance, and also kind of what the profile of a successful applicant looks like. Because after talking to people over the past few years, I think there's, and correct me if I'm wrong with anybody else on the panel, there might be a little bit of a misconception that you already have to be like a mega superstar academic in order to apply to one of these grants. I think first bit of advice would be that it's more about finding kind of an innovative project, an innovative idea that hasn't quite been explored yet, and showing how you're really the perfect applicant to take on that project. Doesn't mean that you necessarily need, to already publish 5 books or something like that. So in terms of my background, you'll see here I have my education is based in literary and translation studies largely, and I do have a mix of experience between the US and Ireland. Just a bit of experience 1 year in Ireland so that I could kind of come into the fellowship and the application process, knowing what I'm getting into, but that there was still plenty after just 1 year, to explore in Ireland, both in terms of the research and also in terms of research like networks and those kinds of things. And I saw some questions in the chat about where people are at in their PhD process. And I can't speak to eligibility, obviously, but I'll just say that I finished my PhD the summer before I applied. So I was pretty fresh out of my program when I applied, and then also when I started the fellowship, even just a year out. Then in terms of my profile, my doctoral thesis was on early modern translations from Spanish into English, and a lot of my writing, presentations, and publications, so forth, were related to translation theory, politics, aesthetics, and so forth. And I was also working on building some other experience. I had received a few smaller grants to do archival research in Europe, learned some digital humanities skills, and I was also really working on building my public humanities chops with a speaker series for the public humanities and sciences in the area where I got my PhD. And coming from that profile, the project, I came to my MSCA project idea through that archival research that I just mentioned. I came to Ireland, to Maynooth University, to take a look at some archival things, and I discovered this like really rich collection of materials on this little known phenomenon of Irish emigration to and from Iberia in the 1600s. And whereas my doctoral thesis had looked at translations from Spanish into English, this offered a perspective from English into Spanish, but via Ireland, and really uncovered a lot of perspectives that were otherwise repressed under English rule during the intensification of the English plantation system. So I was also able to bring my kind of background to this work through my emphasis on archival studies, cultural studies, translation theory, and especially a comparative lens on diasporic and community identity formation. And I really wanted to emphasize, keep building the profile of public engagement with online and in-person archival exhibits, and also digital library collaborations to get these materials out into the world, since people in Ireland and as well as elsewhere don't tend to know about them. So again, just to emphasize that this was something that an avenue that I didn't have time to explore in my doctoral research, but was a natural kind of progression from the doctoral research. And then I think my profile, fit the project well. So that was kind of step one in the process. And then my journey to the project in terms of more of the finding the institutions, mentors, and the application itself, as many things are in research, was not exactly like a straight, it looks kind of neat and nice, point A to point B on the 2 slides, but it's actually a much more winding path in some ways. I think it's important to mention that. I actually originally came to Maynooth University, or originally applied for a different position there, and was actually rejected, which was very sad and disappointing. So I was excited about the position, but the chair of the school very kindly reached out to me and said, we couldn't take you for this, but we liked your profile, and would you be interested in putting together a postdoc application to come to Maynooth? And I want to emphasize that because rejection is very much a part of this world and just life in general. But it really doesn't mean because one door closes that others and other very exciting ones open as well. And I remember in the webinar that I attended a few years ago the fellow who was speaking said that she had applied for the MSCA Fellowship and was rejected the first year or didn't get it. Took in the feedback, reapplied, and was successful. And I actually just recently met someone who I think applied 4 times and finally got it on the last one, and now has a fantastic position in academia afterward. So just really just to say that it doesn't have to be the end. Like I hope you all get it if you don't, but if you don't, then that doesn't necessarily mean that the door is shut. And the nice thing about the fellowship, I think, is that you actually get feedback and you can really improve, as long as you meet the threshold that Ilse mentioned. And then in terms of like making sure that the institutions and mentors were a match, like I said, I kind of came to the host institution both through my research, which made sense, but then also kind of this other job application. So maybe not typical in a way, but it really helps me set up a good application because all of the resources were really there for me. So in terms of the institution, it had this archive that I mentioned. There were also other scholarly experts who were researching Irish history, translation history, migration history, and so forth. I think most importantly, to complement those, there were a lot of professional development supports. If there is a research development office at the institution you're thinking of, definitely take advantage of that, get in touch, see what kinds of things they offer. And also with my mentor, I should mention it's, again, possibly not the most typical of combinations, but she's not actually a subject expert in my specific field. She's really more of an expert for the professional development side of things, like has mentored other postdoctoral fellows, has led and participated in big grants in Ireland and also at the EU level. So she's really helpful with and really an expert on those professional development side of things, which meant when I went to go and figure out where did I want to do a secondment, the University of Salamanca made a lot of sense, not just for the archival materials that were there. For my archive, half is in Maynooth and half is in Salamanca, so it was a natural fit for that. But also because my mentor there, the Professor Javier Murillo, is an absolute expert in the specific field that I'm working in, and was leading and is going to be leading more research groups on the archive, putting together conference collaborations, public exhibitions, and so forth. So I really was able to kind of have a good match in terms of, not just like I have the idea for the innovative project. I think my profile, fits this project well, and I am the right person to carry it out. Then also the institutions and people, like kind of team that I'm putting together, will help me get it to come to fruition. And I think if you can get those steps lined up and early, then the rest of the application will go a lot more smoothly, at least from my personal experience and from talking to others. Then when it comes to the actual application itself and kind of getting into the nitty-gritty, I'll fly through these for reasons of time, but I'd be happy to go into any details in the Q&A as well. I'd say the first thing that was really important for me was to think about scope, because it's a really hard balance between feasibility and ambition. Like the archive I'm working on has 50,000 documents, and that's just like you could spend several lifetimes looking at that material. So really thinking about like what years did I want to look at? What were the research questions that would make the most sense to kind of get to the core of my interests and so forth. Then really sitting down and thinking like, why does this matter? Why now, basically? Why should people be funding this research? And for me, for instance, I might be looking at migration patterns in the 1600s, but there were a lot of biases and issues that came up in that time period that I would argue have left legacies in today's world and today's migration patterns, and also biases against certain groups today. So from there, then how can I bring this to the public? I think Elsa already mentioned this, but it's really important to bring this back to the people who are funding the research and to spread the knowledge. So thinking about like what are some specific public communications that would make sense for me. Learning to speak the lingo of the application, I will admit that I had never used the term work package before I started working on the application. So I kind of had to learn like a whole new way of speaking about these types of things that was very different from my background in the US. But it's really important to making sure that, they're really going to be picking up what you're putting down. And then Also, not just thinking about, with this taking a look at the CV and thinking, how am I good? How am I the right person? Why am I the right person to carry out this project? But also, where are the gaps in my CV that will really help with, I think it was that second column in Ilse's presentation of your impact on your career and the project itself. So again, reaching out to, if, for instance, like your mentor might know things, or the research development office might have resources of like, how can I fill those gaps, whether they're in terms of professional development, like some teaching that you haven't had a chance to do that would make really round out your profile, or if it's really specific research skills that you're going to need to complete your project. And then definitely get feedback as much as you can. Anyone who will look at this application, have them read it. So mentor, the research development office might offer reviews, colleagues, whoever you can, the more eyes, the better on the project. And with that, to give yourself time, just for some kind of more concrete numbers, I would say from like conception to like turning in the application, I probably worked about 3 months on the project proposal. But that was because I would kind of work intensely on it for, a week or two, then get feedback, let it digest, sit, and then kind of come back to it with fresh eyes. And in that process, I think it's really important also to remain flexible. I mean, the core of my project is still what I started with, but the details definitely evolved and changed as I got, more information and thought through things and got feedback. And that's important, honestly, as I'm sure you all know, in research in general, things never quite end the way you begin. Exactly. And then just very quickly for career development, that's a lot of work to put these applications together, but it is so, so worth it. I genuinely learned so much during the past 2 years. And I think it really has had an impact on my career. I've gotten a lot of like supervision experience to work with PhD students, been able to fill the gaps in my teaching with like upper year um, undergraduate courses and some working with MA students, public speaking experience, budgeting, learning, hoarding receipts to get reimbursed, which is an academic skill that they don't teach you in the PhD necessarily. Organizing conferences, liaising with various offices to get funding and so forth. Research skills, like for me, paleography, I had to really work on that. Digital humanities skills, metadata development, raising my visibility or raising the visibility of my profile. Just having the funding to be able to go to lots of conferences and get the work out there is amazing. And then really, like, luckily and delightfully getting invited back to give more talks afterward. So to just kind of sum that up, I think for the academic job market, just even like the prestige of the fellowship, obviously, brings a lot to the CV, but also the scope, like showing them, for instance, in my case, that I had worked on this one aspect of translation history, but now I have this whole other aspect, and I've got you know projects for the future. Like I've got longevity, I guess you could say, a well-rounded skill set, a more international profile, honestly, just confidence going into job interviews. And I was lucky enough to secure an academic job, so I didn't have to go on the non-academic job market. But there's so many transferable skills. I just put a few there, like management, organization, communication, engagement, again, confidence. But the list really goes on. So I know I kind of flew through all of that, but I'd be happy to go through anything else in the Q&A. And thank you, and yeah, best of luck.
Super. Laura, thank you so much. That was really helpful. Thank you for the presentation. So I'll invite all our panelists to come back to our session. So Ilse, you can turn on your camera. So thank you. We've had loads of questions. We won't be able to get through all of them now, but we'll do our best to get through some of those questions. And I know we have typed some answers into them, but just a reminder that if we don't get to your question now, you can follow up with us afterwards. So you can email us at mariecurie@researchireland.ie. So we'll just start. Ilse, I might just come to you first, just for a couple of questions. So we've had loads of interest, which is brilliant, and I'm just trying to filter down through the questions. I'll start with asking you just for a clarification. So the eligibility criteria, researchers with basically the 8-year rule. So an applicant has asked here, is it mandatory that you have 8 years post PhD in order to apply, or is it that the 8 years is a maximum following your PhD in order to be eligible?
Right, that's indeed a very crucial distinction. Our call is intended for postdocs with less than 8 years of research experience. So it has to be the PhD and an 8-year window. We don't necessarily accept people with more than 8 years of research experience in our call unless they can document some extensions, as I mentioned about parental leave or time spent out of research. Those don't count to that 8-year threshold. But our primary target audience is PhD holders within the first 8 years of their PhD, post-PhD career. So less than eight
Okay.
years.
Brilliant. Thank you for the clarification. Another question here, and it's an interesting one. We get asked this quite a lot, and it can be a proximity thing for us as well. But we've been asked, is the UK part or eligible as part of the MSCA Postdoctoral Fellowships?
Yes, I can give a very definite answer on that one. Yes, the UK is eligible to apply as full beneficiary, so you can look into applying with a UK host. They also fully qualify for hosting secondments and NOPs. All allowed.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah. Perfect. Brilliant. Thank you. Laura, I might just come to you, and I know you may have covered some of this, but it is also a question that we get asked a lot. But somebody has come again about identifying the supervisor, identifying a suitable host, and identifying a project. And you might just give a couple of either summary thoughts on that, on either from your experience, or as you said, you've talked to other researchers who also received the fellowship as well, and how they went about that.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's slightly just reiterating what I said, but I think something for the institution, something there that makes sense with the project. Like either your supervisor is, the premier expert in the field, or they have the institution has some sort of, archive or um, physical infrastructure set up to make sure that that's, you actually need to be there in order to carry out the project. Or I think like for my secondment, for instance, like a research group that you can join. I know one of the other people that I talked to, she's just part of this like amazing center for translation studies. And I think being able to integrate into that group was just really great for her own research, her visibility, and also the professional development and teaching opportunities. So I think those would be kind of the ones that immediately come to mind, but there might be other things. Like I said, my mentor at Maynooth is not maybe typical, I'm guessing, that she's not a subject expert. She's more of like a professional development expert. Yeah. I hope that
Okay,
answers enough.
brilliant.
Yeah.
It is. It's really helpful. Thank you. Ilse, just coming back to you. So, interestingly, we just got asked a question about competitiveness in the sense of, is a European fellowship, basically which one do you have a better chance of getting in terms of the statistics on funding? And maybe before I hand over to you to ask that, I would kind of just maybe preface your answer by saying, and following from what Laura is saying here, you really need to be thinking about the research that you want to be doing and finding a host that is the most appropriate for the work that you want to do, the research, and finding a supervisor that's most appropriate. So that's, but of course, people want this funding, so they're going to be somewhat driven by stats as well. But maybe Ilse, you might just make a comment on the global versus the European fellowships.
Right. So yes, overall, and that goes for both European and global, it's a very, very competitive scheme. We have a limited budget, but a lot of applications. So yes, it's very competitive. We have high cutoff scores. But when we look at domains specifically, so if I were to, for example, compare chemistry with economic sciences, there is very little difference. And okay, one more thing to specify maybe, because that touches more on the question that was asked, is about European versus global. Global has a slightly higher success rate than European because fewer people apply for global fellowships because they are having that more complex nature to set up. So it's a bit daunting to manage 2 hosts sometimes in your proposal. So okay, we have fewer applications there. But overall, it's just generally very competitive.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you.
Maybe one thing I can add is that if you really want to look at where it was last year, the last year percentiles table is available on last year's call page. If you want to have an idea about the success rates in each of the 8 scientific areas for European and for global, I would redirect you to that site to consult. But don't be daunted by it. It's just last year's was an exceptional call. Don't be put off by those numbers, please.
Brilliant, thank you. So we have had an interesting question about the mobility rule and whether it would also apply to a family member who would be traveling with the researcher if they get this grant. And Ilse, I hope I'm correct in saying here that the mobility rule only applies to the applicant researcher and not to any family members who may be joining them for the duration of a fellowship if they were funded.
Absolutely correct.
And Ilse, again, just a kind of clarification on secondments. So somebody has asked if a secondment can be taken to their home EU country of residence. Obviously they'll travel to another country to undergo the fellowship, but could they then go on a secondment back to their home country?
Yes, we have no limitation or restriction on that. If the secondment host makes sense within the context of the proposed research, then by all means you can pick that home country, university, or organization, more broadly speaking, and go back there. We don't have any problem with that.
Brilliant. And we have got asked by a few people whether slides will be available. So just to let people know that we do plan to share a copy of the slides with everyone who has registered after the webinar. So just a question then, Ilse, I don't know if you can answer this kind of outright now, but we have had a question on whether you would have any tips for resubmission. And the question goes on to say that it's tricky to know how to advance and change the application while still staying on course with project aims and objectives. So if you have any thoughts on that.
A very tricky one indeed, because we rely on our external experts to assess the content of the proposal. And if something was already rated as very good, there is not that much room for improvement. And it might even be that it's not your proposal that needs improving. It's just that compared to the overall ranking, you just fell short of the funding threshold, but your proposal by itself was very good. So the only recommendation I can give is that if the experts had left a specific comment on, for example, IPR or a specific topic in the ESR that you've received for your previous submission, to look at that and to see how you can integrate that particular weakness, if identified. It might be that there wasn't any specific weakness, and then it's just really, I'm sorry to say, bad luck that you just fell below the threshold. But if there is anything in your ESR that was mentioned by the experts, they saw it as a point that could be focused on for the future. So do take that into account when you write your new proposal, and don't overthink it as well. So it could be a very small tweak that was not fully convincing. See if you can address that without changing the whole text about, again, for instance, IPR.
Thank you. That's really helpful. We've had a question asking if there is a list of Irish universities with openings for MSCA postdoc fellowships. And essentially any Irish legal entity in a European member state or Horizon Europe associated country, of course, can be a beneficiary, can be a host for these postdoctoral fellowships. So that goes as well for any Irish university. There are MSCA postdoctoral fellows across the university system and across the research system in Ireland. So again, I'd say, you can go directly to the websites of these universities in Ireland and have a look at the research, but often it can be through, maybe your own networks, your current supervisors' networks as well, or indeed, you might look at the kind of state of the art in your current research area in terms of the literature and who is publishing there, and you may find a prospective supervisor. But all are open to applications. So, Ilse, I might just come back to you again. We've had a question here regarding supervision, and the question is whether all supervisors need to be based in the same institution, i.e., the candidate's host institution, or can a secondary supervisor be based in another institution, be that in the same country or in another country, beyond the potential site of a secondment?
All right, that's an interesting question indeed, because a priori, what we expect to see for a postdoctoral fellowship is that you have one main supervisor who indeed works at the host organization that you are applying for. So it's a one-on-one match normally. But if we look at the context of a potential secondment or a short visit, then that could be having its own supervisor in a different organization. So we're not opposed to co-supervising, as long as in the proposal it is clear who will be the main supervisor who will work for the main host organization. But we see it quite often that we have these secondary supervisors, if you will, especially in the context of secondments and NAPs.
Brilliant, thank you. Laura, I'll just come to you quickly. A quick question for you. In terms of the application process and the various components of it, was there any particular element of that that kind of took you by surprise in terms of, was it easier than you thought it would be to address, or was it most challenging? Be that something to do with, maybe the host or your training plan or that kind of thing. Was there anything particular that you would advise on?
Yeah, actually and I just typed an answer in for, I think the space is hard. Like it seems like a lot of words, but actually when you really want to give like enough rich information on the project in your background, staying within that 10 pages is tough. And tables, I would say, for the work packages, the transfer of knowledge, GEC plans, that like really helps lay things out very clearly also, which I imagine is nice for the evaluators to have like just a clean space with that kind of thing. But on top of that, I didn't have a chance to mention it, but I tried to get a placement set up for myself, and I thought that that would be the easiest part of the application process. Like, can I come work for you for free for 6 months? And it was actually really hard. Like I kept not getting an answer, or people would get back to me like weeks or even months later, or it just wasn't possible with the way their organization is set up. So I kind of left that. I got the secondment and the primary host set up early, but kind of left the placement a bit more towards the end. And I regretted that because I was working up as late as I could with the deadline and it just wasn't possible. So I was surprised, honestly. People, I guess maybe I'm sure that it involves challenges, to incorporate someone for 6 months and so far in the future. But yeah, if you want the placement, definitely get that, put out the feelers early as well and see if you had know people with connections, like through the university or anywhere. Yeah.
I think that is incredibly valuable advice, Laura. And I think I was just about to ask you for one final piece of advice, but actually I think that that's a really great one to give. So, Ilse, I might just ask you if you have one final thought or one final piece of advice before we wrap up for our potential applicants here.
Well, I think I might have one specific piece of advice. Yes, it's don't be afraid to apply to the call. And I'll refer to that quote that is so often attributed to Marie Curie is nothing in life is to be feared, just understood. And I know that our call might seem a little daunting and all these rules are very complex, but if you take the time to familiarize yourself with all the rules and steps and conditions, then it becomes much more accessible. So my advice would be do that, read everything very carefully, and then trust yourself to apply.
Yes, absolutely. And avail of any supports which are open to you, be that within a host organization or, of course, there are supports at national level as well in a lot of countries. So with that, unfortunately, that's all we have time for today. So I really want to thank Ilse and Laura for joining us. And I hope that, attendees here found it informative and useful. And a recording of today's webinar will be made available as well on our YouTube channel, and a reminder that we will send a link to that directly to all who have registered. So if you would like to hear more case studies about successful projects from Irish organisations, you can check out our webinars from the last few years, which are also available via our YouTube channel. For now, though, I hope you all enjoy the rest of your day wherever you are in the world, and we wish you the very best of luck with your applications. So goodbye for now, and thank you.